Hello, my name is Andrew. You can call me Cookies, and today we'll be going over the Quickstart Mythic Plus guide for Holy Paladin, the last of our Quickstart Mythic Plus guides, so that's awesome. Going right into it for our talents, the whole, essence of this build is to use the Glimmer of Light Azerite trait, as well as keep Holy Shock off cooldown as much as possible, or on cooldown as much as possible, and be resetting the cooldown of Holy Shock as much as possible, so that we get as many uses out of it as possible. So I will also go over some talents that are good if you don't have Glimmer traits, so don't worry. But going over the Glimmer build, Crusader's Might in the first row always. This is just going to help us press Holy Shock more often, so that's a win-win. Other than this, you can think about taking Bestow Faith if you need just more raw HPS or single target healing on like your tank, or during weeks like Bursting or Grievous or things like that. Bestow Faith can do some good work. And then second row doesn't really matter too much. These are all pretty viable, and it's kind of just dependent on your playstyle and what you want out of the utility row. But I find the Unbreakable Spirit usually does the best because it just allows you to use your big CDs a lot more often throughout the dungeon, like an extra once throughout the dungeon, which is actually a pretty big deal, especially on like last bosses of a dungeon during a tyrannical week and whatnot, if you used it multiple times throughout the instance. Next up, we have Blinding Light is going to be our go-to unless our group needs some kind of crowd control from Repentance. But Blinding Light, since you're going to be in melee all the time anyways, it serves as like an AoE interrupt/disrupt effect, or if your tank just needs like a breather or something off the mobs. Blinding Light is really, really awesome for that. And you can essentially interrupt mobs that are normally not interruptible, because it serves as kind of like a mini stun. And then next, we're gonna always take Devotion Auras. Sometimes we could take Aura of Sacrifice if we want to like have that kind of playstyle where we keep Beacon of Light on ourselves and we're not running Beacon of Virtue. But usually we'll just go with Devotion Aura because damage reduction is just the king of Mythic Plus, so damage reduction to everybody at all times is very, very nice. And then the next row we take Holy Avenger because this will help empower our Holy Shocks, which that's what we want out of this build, is stronger Holy Shocks. Though Judgment of Light can be used as a replacement if you don't like the playstyle of Holy Avenger, or you just feel like you need more sustained healing rather than burst healing through cooldowns. But it should be worth mentioning that Holy Avenger also increases our DPS while Judgment of Light does not. And DPS is a big part of Holy Paladin and Mythic Plus. And then the next row we take Sanctified Wrath for pretty much the same reason. It empowers our Holy Shock significantly and our Wings cooldown significantly. Avenging Crusader is like the replacement option if we're not running Glimmer, or we just don't really need the extra power in our wings. But this will swap our wings to a more like, I guess it's more based around like Crusader Strike than Holy Shock, because it's not reducing the cooldown of Holy Shock for its duration. And then Awakening isn't very good. It can see play, but the problem with it is it's RNG, because it's every time you cast Light of Dawn, you have a chance to get wings, which just isn't good in Mythic Plus. You don't want things that are just completely out of your control all the time, especially when it's something as big as like giving you wings. That's like a pretty big deal. And then to counter that point, our usual talent that we'll go with in this last row is either Beacon of Virtue or Divine Purpose, which Divine Purpose is another kind of RNG ability, but it's not tied to a giant, huge, important cooldown like wings. So this is just, you have a chance to essentially refund a Holy Shock every time you Holy Shock. So it can be really nice just to give us extra Glimmer procs and stuff like that. But other than that, you take Beacon of Virtue if you need more like AoE healing output for things like Grievous or Bursting, or just certain dungeons where you're struggling to keep all of the group topped off. But if you want more damage, and that's pretty much what you take Divine Purpose for, is to do extra damage and just have more Holy Shocks throughout the course of the dungeon. And then you still get to have Beacon of Light, which is always nice to like put on yourself for the tank. And like I said, if you run Aura of Sacrifice, that's when you would run something like Divine Purpose, so that you can just keep Beacon on yourself. So that goes over talents. If you don't run the Glimmer traits, I'll just show you the talents that you'll normally use right here. So your normal talent setup would look something like this. And that's pretty much it. That's the only changes you make. You just make the Bestow Faith for healing Avenging Crusader, because you don't need like your wings to be crazy on Holy Shock, and you don't need it to really last longer usually. And then Beacon of Virtue for more healing. So, and then we're going to go into Azerite next. So for Azerite, obviously Glimmer of Light is our go-to trait. Try to get 3 of these, but as long as you have 2 or more, you can run the Glimmer build. And then our filler traits are things like Indomitable Justice, which is a damage dealing trait. It just makes our judgment deal extra damage, but again, that's a big part of Holy Paladin and Mythic Plus, is how much damage they can bring to a team comp. And then other than this, you can use things like generic traits that increase your stats. Those are always good because they help DPS and healing. And then you can also run like the DPS traits, which is again like Indomitable Justice, Undulating Tides, Tidal Surge, stuff like that. And then if you want more healing, you can run things like Avenger's Might, which is the mastery proc when you press wings. And then also you can run things like Divine Revelations is okay. You can run things like Grace of the Justicar, which is every time you judgment, it does like a big AoE heal. And then another one that's worth mentioning is like Radiant Incandescence, that will increase healing and damage, so that's like a nice all-around talent to take, or trait to take. And then again, for healing, you can take something like Breaking Dawn, which increases your Light of Dawn healing. So you essentially are just taking you're taking 3 Glimmer traits, and then just kind of using filler traits for all the other like second traits and stuff like that. And then if you don't have the Glimmer build, again, you just do the exact same thing without Glimmer. You just use all the filler traits that I just mentioned and just kind of pick and choose which ones you like the best. And then we're going to cover essences next. So as far as essences go, we're pretty much always running Visions of Perfection as our major. This just will proc our wings way, like, a lot throughout the dungeon, which just helps Holy Shock be so much stronger. And even though it's RNG based, it still reduces the cooldown of wings. It still procs when we need it to. Like, you'll get a significant amount of procs because the average procs per minute is about, like, it's almost 1 proc per minute. So you're pretty much getting it every boss fight and stuff like that when you need it. And then as minors, we're just going to use any combination of the 3 following essences for minors, which is Crucible of Flame, Conflict and Strife, and Ever Rising Tide. Those are pretty much the only ones you'll ever want to use. You can use stuff like, if you really need to have like filler ones, you can run stuff like Vitality Conduit or Memory of Lucid Dreams or Well of Existence, but those aren't recommended because they either don't give enough stats, don't give enough healing output, or like Well of Existence, it falls behind in Mythic Plus a lot because you're not going to do as much overhealing as you might think you would as a Holy Paladin, because a lot of the time you're going to be spending time doing damage to make sure that you're not overhealing. And when Well of Existence is falling behind and not pulling up a bunch of overhealing, like say on a Resto Druid where you have like hots going on everybody that are a bit uncontrollable on who you target with them, like with Wild Growth and stuff, the Well of Existence is just always going to be empty and just like spitting out tiny little heals here and there, so it's just not very useful. So essentially the main setup is Visions Major, and then Conflict and Strife and Crucible of Flame Minor for DPS, and then if you want to do like more healing output focused playstyles, then you run Visions Major with things like Ever Rising Tide and Conflict and Strife as minors instead of Crucible of Flame, because Crucible of Flame is essentially just like a straight DPS oriented essence. So that covers essences. And then the last thing I wanted to go over is just like kind of how to play the Glimmer setup. So it's really easy. It's essentially use Holy Shock either on the enemy if you don't need healing in the group, or on the group if you need healing on the group. And then if you need healing on the group further, you use Light of Dawn, and then you're just utilizing your procs when you get them. And then when Holy Shock is on cooldown, you're pressing Crusader Strike to get it back off cooldown. You can see there, it just helped the cooldown get refunded. And then I use it again, Crusader Strike again, and then it's off cooldown. And if you have Holy Shock and Crusader Strike on cooldown at the same time, like so, you would use something like Judgment or Consecration, or again like Light of Dawn if your group needs healing. But if you're just trying to do damage, then you throw like Judgments and Consecrations in between when Crusader Strike and Holy Shock are on cooldown. But other than that, it's just Holy Shock, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's pretty much it. You're really just Holy Shocking, and then you can use things like Flash of Light or Light of the Martyr if you need like group healing, and Holy Shock just isn't doing the trick. But it's mainly just keeping Holy Shock off cooldown and keep on just using it nonstop on the group or enemies depending on who needs you know, either healing or damage. And if you have multi-target situations like this, make sure you apply Holy Shock to each of them while you're fighting like this, because what it'll essentially do is when I Holy Shock one target, you can see it damages all the targets. So like I'll Holy Shock this guy and everyone takes damage because of the Glimmer trait. Same thing with healing. If you keep Glimmer on the tank, when you're Holy Shocking enemies, it'll heal the tank. So that pretty much covers the whole thing. Hopefully that helps, and hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.